What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Jackal Gold Games. I'm here with Acid Roots Wired. This is going to be my first collaboration video on this channel. And in this collab video, we're going to be talking about our introduction to video games, how we got into gaming. Now, my story will be very short and brief, but I'm going to tell it. So, I was born in the year 1999, but going back in my memory, if I can remember when this happened, this had to be sometime in the 2000s. I was a toddler slash kid when this happened. So my first video game and first video game console and how I got into video games was the video game Banjo-Tooie on the video game console N64, the Nintendo 64. I specifically remember a level from Banjo-Tooie back when I played it for the first time as a toddler slash kid, where it was like a stage where it was Banjo and the bird and like some mines or tunnels. I can't remember the name of the stage, but that's what I remember from my childhood on the N64, aka the Nintendo 64. And that was the first game I played. That was the first system I played on. That was a great game within itself. That was a great system within itself. And that's pretty much how I got into video games. And that's what led to me getting into gaming. And then as it progressed from there, it was Super Nintendo, the SNES, the PS2, the Xbox 360, etc. It just escalated from there. But that's my story of my introduction to video games. Like I told you, it was very short, very brief, but I went ahead and told it. So that's it. That's how I got into video games. A lot of these games and consoles were bought around me because people in my family played games and were gamers. So that's how I had access to this stuff. So that's it for my part. Peace out. And here's Aster Roots Wired with his part. Peace.
What is going on, folks? This is Acid Roots Wired. So I've got a collaboration video here with Jackal Gold Games, and this is about the introduction to gaming that we particularly had. So my introduction to gaming, I'm going to have two stories to tell about this particular one, just because I feel like one of which is somewhat more paltry, just because it was more of me in like a relatively young age, I would have to say. Me being from the 90s, I kind of feel like there's like two entry points as far as that would particularly kind of happen. So I just look after the first actual introduction to games I had was with the old school 80s Nintendo. I came up in the 90s, so the first pretty much game machine I remember owning was back in 1992. I had the original Nintendo with, I want to say, Super Mario Brothers slash Duck Hunt. It was kind of a combination game that you got both games on the particular package as far as that when you got the Nintendo Zapper and some of those type things to kind of have now. Played those games up to a certain point, but it broke pretty quickly. I just remember playing it back in like the summer one time, and it just overheated. That was the old Nintendo was a machine that you couldn't play for very long. You couldn't leave on. You would have to turn off when you were done with it, and you could only play it for like an hour or so, or maybe not an hour, but like 3 or 4 hours. It was not a machine that lasted very long before it would overheat and pitches like that. And I just remember leaving it on. It wound up breaking. It wound up breaking, and then I just didn't have one for a while. But that was pretty much somewhere summer 92, 93, something like that. I suppose ways back, but I'd say I was pretty much relatively young age, pretty much before I had started school, pitches like that, preschool era, some of those type times. But another game I remember from those particular times, another particular game I remember renting around that time in like the early 90s, as far as that pitch can happen before the machine broke, was probably Star Wars. Just remember renting that a few times. Didn't probably got to like the first few stages of it. But that was pretty much about it. But another introduction I had in more casual sense pitches like that. I did have some other machines, the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, some of those type ones. But in terms of like a more casual introduction, when things kind of became more modernized and pitched like that, the sort of stuff that's kind of on my Acid Roots Wired channel with games like Guitar Hero and like Devil May Cry and Rise to Honor, some of those type ones, some of the classic PS2 games, pitches like that. That's just more modernized and just more casual. I'd say it was probably the PlayStation 2. I picked that up in like the summer of 2002, and one of the first games I played for that would be Grand Theft Auto 3. I'd have to say it was just a natural pitch. I remember hearing about that in school and such, and everyone's really fucking with the game and we're asking for cheat codes and that sort of stuff. And I just remember messing with that game, playing that a ton. Obviously going on rampages, pitches like that, using the tank and mauling people as far as that particular kind of happened with it. Just some excellent type stuff. Pretty bona fide game. I mean, this was pretty impactful the way that particularly kind of happened. Is that it was one basically around that time when September 11th came out and some of those type pitches. It's just a pretty big deal around those particular times. PlayStation 2 was a hot ticket. I remember from back in those days, just an excellent type concept. I probably needed to play more games around that particular time, but I did use my PlayStation 2 for a lot of movies, summer 2002 pictures like that. Some of the ones I had were like Rush Hour 2 and Triple X with Vin Diesel, some of those type ones. I watched a lot of movies on my PlayStation. It's a pretty good concept. That's just a definite killer feature that PlayStation has. One of the more exciting things I remember about that particular machine is just rocking with that all summer, just watching those movies and those sorts of things, just having some music with that sort of stuff. Just an excellent concept. It's a real triple threat that the PS2 kind of was. Used it quite a bit throughout the 2000s as far as that particular fair kind of went. Just has plenty of good games for it and that sort of stuff. Those are two of my introductions to games that I'd say. So it's a pretty dope concept. Get some of that, I'd have suppose. That's pretty fly stuff there.